Do you like salmon fishing as much as I do? Whether you're new to the sport or a seasoned angler, this video's got pro tips on gear, how to find fish, hook fish, how to catch more fish to fill your freezer. I hope to see you on the water. Look, I'm not making this video to brag what a great fisherman I am, because I'm not. I know a ton of great fishermen. I'm making this video to share a wealth of knowledge of over 30 years of salmon fishing with the tips and tricks to help expedite the learning curve for you and make you a better fisherman. If I'm missing something, you got a technique that just kills it, please drop a comment, share the wealth. I love catching fish. All right, to start, you're going to need a flotation device. Whether that's a boat, a kayak, or an inflatable, you're going to need a boat equipped with a downrigger. Next, we're going to get into rods and reels. I'm not going to go into great depth here because there's literally dozens of options for an outdoorsman to choose from. I prefer a 9-foot rod with a lot of action. This is an ugly stick, big water. And I also fish a level wind crank style reel. It's got a 4.2 to 1 crank ratio, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. The other option is a knuckle buster. It's very similar to a fly reel. It's a 1 to 1 ratio, much more sporting, highly seen in Canadian waters. I like to equip my rods with a high vis line. That way when it's in the downrigger, I can see that line. I can see if there's seaweed coming, if it's going to be impacted by that line. Highly recommend a high vis line. I fish 30-pound test. Seems to do just fine here in the Pacific Northwest for any salmon species we're going after. With literally thousands of lure choices out there, I like to keep my gear selection pretty simple. We're going to focus on 3 different types. The first lure combination we're going to talk about today is the simplest. A plug. Super simple, super effective. Tie this plug directly to a 40 to 50 pound fluorocarbon leader, 4 to 6 feet. I use a heavier leader because salmon have big teeth. I don't want them biting my main line. Plus, since we're using high vis line, keeps those fish from detecting that line. This is connected directly to the downrigger clip, no flasher. So when you feel that fish, fighting that fish, there's no drag from your flasher as you bring that fish in. The next lure we're going to talk about is one of my favorites, the spoon. It's effective for both king salmon and coho. This is fished behind an 11-inch Pro Troll flasher in leader length, depending on what you're going after. Typically longer leader for king salmon, 36 inches, down to 24 inches for coho salmon. Color matters when salmon fishing. But what's even more important when you're fishing spoons is size. That's why it's important to have a wide array of sizes, whether you're fishing kingfishers or coho killers. Matching the spoon to the bait size is the most important factor to catch fish. One trick I learned long ago is making sure you rig your spoon right. So it's Christmas. You just got a brand new lure. You're so excited. You open this thing up. You pull that thing out of the box. Boom, brand new lure. What do? I cut that factory hook off. You want to know why we do that? Because without that, a fish with that hook being so close to the spoon can use that spoon as leverage when you're fighting them and pop that hook out. Here in the Puget Sound, we have to use barbless hooks. So it's even more critical that you attach that hook to a swivel so it can spin freely. It gets the spoon farther away from the fish's head and less likely to lose that fish. The final rig we're going to talk about is the hoochie rig. It's a go-to and a must-have for coho salmon. It's a little bit more labor intensive because you do have to tie leaders. You do have to assemble the hoochie lure setup, and you need to prep bait. But it's go-to, absolute must for catching coho salmon. When prepping your leader, I don't like to use store-bought leaders. 1, I don't know what kind of hooks they use. 2, I don't know what kind of leaders they use. Third, I can customize my leaders to have special hook spacing, and quite frequently like to do this double offset hook. So if a fish bites from either direction, I know I've got a solid hook set up. I tie my leaders with a 4/0 trailing hook, a 3/0 front hook with a 30-pound fluorocarbon leader. To prep the finished bait, simply add 4 to 6 6mm glow beads onto the leader, followed by an iridescent skirt, followed by your color of choice hoochie. When done, you want your hoochie over your skirt, over the glow beads, and when it sits down firmly, you want about a half of the trailer hook extended beyond your hoochie setup. When you go to rig this with bait, I always put the bait on the top hook. That way that fish has really got to come up and bite and gets nabbed and hit by that trailer hook at minimum. I'll typically tie all my leaders at one time, prepping for the season, in addition to tying a few baits that I know some color selections work really well. I don't like to use leader keepers. I like to individually package my leaders into plastic bags because your hands are wet typically when you're going to grab a new leader. On those bulk leader keepers, you end up getting all your leaders wet, you don't take care of them, and all your hooks and leaders are rusted out before the end of the season. These bags keep them nice and dry, reusable year after year. Alright, what we're doing today is we're going to cut up some bait for salmon fishing. I use green label herring, and we don't use whole baits because that's a huge waste, because this stuff's $6 to $10 depending on where you buy it. Alright, so I like to use a surface that I'm going to throw away. And all I do is I come in, I'm going to cut off the head of that herring, that's going to go away. Literally split the herring in half. Cut off its tail. Get rid of the guts. And then cut it in small triangles. Now to that one fish, we just made 10 baits. Alright, so I put about 3 cups of water. Then I'm going to put about a 1/3 part salt. And we're going to put in some borax. Mix it up a little bit. And we want about a tablespoon dehydrated milk. And then the secret sauce, Miss Stewart's liquid bluing. And mix it around. When you're done, you want a nice cloudy blue mixture. You put this in the fridge for about 24 hours before you're ready to fish. The cured herring pieces can be frozen for later use. It's first important to know about the species you're going after, salmon. There's 2 ways salmon detect bait in the water. One is along their lateral line. They detect movement and then move in closer to analyze with their eyesight. 2, salmon can only look up. That limits their visibility, so if you're fishing below the salmon, you're never going to get a hookup. In the Puget Sound, we've got a water clarity that ranges anywhere from 15 to 40 feet of visibility. So that means you've got roughly an 80-foot bubble at best to a 40-foot bubble, 30-foot bubble at worst. Sometimes in the spring, when there's a lot of runoff, it gets down to single digits. So it's important to understand what the fish can see and how to fish accurately for them. General depths we fish at vary depending upon the species. Early in the mornings, both coho and kings are higher in the water column. Coho can be right on the surface, down to the 35, 45 foot. Kings can come up to 60, maybe 50. And then as soon as that sun rises, those fish tend to sink and get into greater depths within the water column. There we're fishing anywhere between 30 and 90 for coho. Whereas kings, you're typically fishing 90 all the way to the bottom, 110, 120. We've even caught kings down to 200, 220. Kings tend to like the bottom, hug the bottom. We call it ball dragging. Hit that downrigger ball on the bottom, assuming you got a relatively flat surface. Bring it up 5-10 feet so you don't get a hang up and lose all your gear is a great tactic for kings, especially if you're not finding that bait ball. When you do find a bait ball on your depth finder, you want to look for what depth that bait's at, where the salmon might be. The shape of that bait ball tells a lot about what the salmon are doing. A lot of time, if you see kind of an hourglass shape in that bait ball, that means those fish are hitting the center of that bait ball, and if you're fishing coho, are pushing those bait towards the surface so they're easier to catch. Kings, on the other hand, are going to be pushing that bait down towards the depths where you might be dragging the bottom, dragging the top of the bait ball. We're going to talk a lot about depth and how to fish certain depths utilizing downriggers. Fishing with downriggers gives you an immense ability to fish at a specific and targeted depth. This is where middle school algebra comes into play. So at the speeds we talked about, optimal downrigger cable line is at a 45 degree. Now doing some math, if we remember a squared plus b squared equals c squared, we can start to identify the true line lengths of what we're fishing. So if it says 100 feet on the downrigger, you're not fishing 100 feet. Doing that quick math, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, we're actually only fishing at So doing a little bit of quick math in your head is getting your gear to the exact elevation, targeted elevation that you're trying to fish for. Generally speaking, salmon prefer to swim into the current. So take this into consideration when fishing. If you're trolling with the current, you take a risk of cruising by those fish going Mach 80 with limited time for them to hit your bait. I prefer to troll against the current. This slows the presentation down in front of the fish, giving maximum visibility for those fish to strike your bait. When you troll with the current, which we do frequently, I often like to do zigzag patterns. This gives maximum possibility of exposure of that bait in front of the fish, while when you're turning, offers different speed presentations of your lures, which often triggers a fish to bite. Something to keep in mind as you hit the water. Here's a perfect picture example of an appropriate hook setup. Fish bites. We're on the rod in less than 2 seconds. Crank down on that line as fast as possible, eliminating that slack, and then lift the rod up to eliminate any and all slack in that line, providing tension to that hook. Boom, fish on. This is where having a reel, a level wind with a high crank ratio comes into play. The higher the crank ratio, the faster that line's going to reel in. If you're fishing those Islander reels or the knuckle busters that got 1-to-1 ratio, you've really got to be on your game to get that slack reeled in as quickly as possible before that fish spits that lure, especially when you're fishing barbless hooks in Puget Sound. Lastly is the net job. One tip I can offer is have the person who's reeling in that fish try not to horse that fish and get that fish's head out of the water. That fish, once its head is above the surface, has more leverage. Thrashing his head about can kick your lure quicker than you know what happened. So as you're bringing that fish into the boat, keep good tension on it, reel close, and at the last second, have that individual raise that rod tip as high as they can. It just slides that fish, pulls it straight into the net. Keep the net out of the water until the last possible second. Dip in under the fish, lift up, and hold on tight. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, please leave a comment, like, and subscribe.